Hey there. I offer this podcast freely. Your support really makes a difference. To make a donation, visit reneemckenna.com. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about the hidden jewels that live in our shadow side. And shadow is a term created by Carl Jung to describe the aspects of the self that hold all the things that we don't like about ourselves, but that we can't really get rid of. And we might disown them, push them away, shut them down. They pop up like boogeymen, monsters in the night. They might be like bad neighbors or perpetrators on our own idealized self-image. And it could be understood that the shadow aspects of the self drive most of our dysfunctions, our addictions, our deep and secret sufferings. And because we live in a mysterious and interconnected universe, and because it is impossible on this plane of existence to avoid the ultimate truth, although we might try, if the shadow aspects of the self are disowned completely enough, they will often manifest externally in abusive relationships, horrible bosses, unlucky circumstances. Most of us have an idealized self-image. It's often known as the ego, and it's our idea of who we need to be or should be in the world. It often develops early in childhood and then morphs and develops as we grow older. And the basis of the idealized self is what we think we need to do or how we think we need to be in order to be loved or lovable. And that formation of what is lovable and unlovable has a lot to do with our parents and caregivers, with our culture, with our school and coaches, the external expectations and the approval that we get as young children, or the disapproval. Now, it's certainly not all external because lots of people, including myself, can be very divergent from what's expected and develop our own ideas of what we need to do to thrive and survive in the world. In fact, if we grow up in a lot of dysfunction or really reject our family of origin or culture or just totally don't fit into it, we may develop an idealized self that's a complete polar opposite of what is expected. That was kind of my route after trying being the perfect child for the first 9 years of my life and still feeling desperately anxious, disconnected, and depressed. I pretty consciously decided to turn to the shadow side. Screw this being good stuff. If I'm going down, I might as well have fun while I'm doing it. And so my idealized self-image became as a drug addict, a petty criminal, a tough guy. And perhaps surprisingly, there was a pretty decent amount of time where that actually worked for me. And I had a lot of friends and I felt really connected, except that I was making myself throw up every day after I binged food. And when I hit my first bottom with drugs and alcohol at 16 and tried my version of getting clean, which just meant to stop using drugs and alcohol, I flipped back over into that overachiever mode of being a good girl. Did really well in school, started doing artwork again, stopped stealing and flipping off the cops, getting high every day. But when I stopped medicating myself, I became suicidally depressed. I know about dark thoughts and the relentless shadow that at that point seemed like a terrible enemy and now has become a sacred guide and friend. Because the shadow holds aspects of the authentic self that if we don't heal, integrate, and evolve them, they are relentless, monstrous forms that will try to take us down and even kill us. And from my perspective today, what the shadow self attacks is this false self, this idealized image that actually separates me from the possibility of true connection on a soul level with myself and others, because the idealized self has rejected all those things that don't fit into the tiny, rigid box of who it thinks it is, or who it thinks it needs to be in order to be loved and accepted by others. So I have a client I've worked with for a few years, nice Jewish girl, raised in a very religious family. She's very spiritual herself, but doesn't really identify with the Jewish religion very much. And she's a therapist, very high achieving. She's an athlete, and she believes deeply in service to others. She's always very happy and joyful. In fact, sometimes that happiness is a little bit too sweet. And she's got some backlash for that super happy, everything's great attitude that's been really confusing for her. She has a couple coworkers who just don't like her, and it makes her crazy because she really needs everyone to like her. Because as we've discovered in our work, she believes she needs to be perfect in order to be loved. And if there's anything imperfect about her, she wants to fix it as soon as possible. She's rigid about exercise and how her body is and staying thin. She's very thoughtful and gift-giving to others. And she is an incredibly generous and deeply compassionate person, but a lot of it is rooted in fear. And she had a date rape experience that just blew the doors off of the perfect little world that she had constructed for herself. And that trauma, which she told no one about for a long time, developed into these relentless and vicious dark thoughts that she should kill herself. And this was so completely counter to her idea of who she was as a happy, high-achieving, service-oriented person. She was literally at her wit's end. She did a couple of stints inpatient, tried lots of different medication, and ultimately came to see me. And it's very interesting because lots of times when people have a presenting inner critic or some really deep internalized negativity, it's rooted as a defensive structure that's got twisted and become dysfunctional. And there are some really powerful practices of negative energy extraction, depossession, and transformation rooted in Tibetan Buddhist practice and shamanism that are incredibly effective. Clearing out these old structures and creating or inviting in new, more productive, constructive ways of being internally. What I call an inner IOS, an update to our own internal operating system, which I think we all need on a regular basis. And those processes are illuminated in my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, with free guided audio on my website if you want to do some of that work yourself. That's why I wrote the book, so people could walk through the processes that I would bring you through in my office on your own. And we've done those processes over and over on this particularly vicious and nefarious inner voice or energy that's quite demonic and hateful. So polar to who she is as a person. It's terrifying to her, actually. And every time we do that inner work, rather than dissolving, that structure turns into her own authentic self. And we've been doing a lot of work to integrate, develop compassion, and even love for this aspect of her authentic self. But it's become clear over time that this suicidal formation is composed of all of the things that she has disowned and rejected about herself. One of the really powerful lessons of being a human on this plane of existence in the middle world is that we live in an ecosystem and we can't get away from what is true. It's very much like the pollution problem that we have. We can throw our garbage away, but it doesn't actually go away. It goes underground or into the ocean and comes back to haunt us if we don't deal with it wisely and sustainably. And the same is true for our psyche. When we try to disown authentic parts of ourselves, to reject our feelings, our experiences, or aspects of who we really are, whether they're sexual, spiritual, creative, or relational, they can become like that pollution, monstrous forms that poison our inner environment with addictions, with anxiety, depression, compulsions, hopelessness, suicidal thoughts. And so the work is to turn toward them, to embrace them, to welcome them in, bring them home. Every part of ourself holds vital life energy and wisdom. One of my favorite quotes from Jesus comes from the Gnostic Gospels, the disowned early Christian writings found in the 40s in Nag Hammadi, put together in a book by Elaine Pagels and other places. All the stuff that didn't make it into the Bible. And from the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus is to have said, "What is within you? If you bring it forth, it will save you. And what is within you, if you do not bring it forth, it will destroy you." And this is a spiritual truth. And it can be a really hard one, perhaps the most challenging of our life. And it's possible to disown the good parts of ourselves as well. For myself, I rejected a lot of my gifts and talents. I felt like my light was maybe too bright. I was bullied for being a good girl when I was in elementary school. So I rejected a lot of what was good about me and became what some might call shadow identified. I liked being dangerous. I wanted people to be afraid of me, so I wasn't afraid of them. I aspired to be a social dropout. That was the defensive structure I identified with, and all the things that might bring me worldly success in the ordinary culture, I rejected. And a lot of my work as a grown-up has been to reintegrate and make friends with the gifted and talented parts of myself. And I think people's fear of success and fear of failure, which is usually a two-sided coin, is often that. How do we own what's good about us, as well as what we might deem unworthy? Because sometimes what's good about us might threaten those we want approval from as well. If we became too successful, we might leave those we love behind, or they might be jealous and feel bad. But for my client, it's horrifying to her that she would need to love this monstrous form. She wants to kill it, make it go away. And she needs to grow big enough to be able to integrate it. And the wisdom and balance that it holds about suffering, rage, authentic power, difficult feelings, that all light casts a shadow. And if we're happy, happy, happy all the time, it's bullshit. Because being a human is hard. And if we want to be truly compassionate and authentic, we need to make room for that in ourselves and in others in a real and vulnerable and even unpredictable way, because it will lead us into unpredictable places. The truth really will set us free, but it will often push us right up against the wall first. So one of the many perks of having children is that we get to, or are forced to, listen or read to many stories that we might not be exposed to or might even avoid as adults. And my children both loved extensive stories, and there are so many great audiobooks out there now. We spent hours and hours listening to often multiple volume stories, some of which are quite deep and profound. And there's a little known series that has what I consider a terrible name, but it's one of the most meaningful epics that I've come across. And this is the Unicorn Chronicles series by Bruce Coville. And it's this extensive 5-book series. I haven't read the 5th book. It just came out in 2020. But the first 4 are really amazing, and they grow in complexity and depth. In fact, you can see Coville's development as a writer over the 16-year period that he wrote those first 4 books. And I have to say, this is a bit of a spoiler, so beware if you want to read the Unicorn Chronicles. And the audiobook I find quite excellent. My son and I actually love spoilers. In fact, he will often read the end of a book first before he reads the whole thing. And I frequently, if I come to a difficult part of a novel, will go to Wikipedia and read the synopsis to see if I want to continue reading it. Because if I don't like where a storyline goes, then I don't want to spend my time with it. But the themes, the plot lines, and the character development in the Unicorn Chronicles is outstanding. So in general, the books are about the interface between the race of unicorns and the race of humans. And the unicorns in the story, just like in Western mythology, are these magical, mythical, very pure beings. And there's a human who was inadvertently hurt by a unicorn and has come to hate them and is bent on making them extinct. And probably in about the 2nd book of the series, we're introduced to this disembodied entity that we come to know as the Whisperer, who is poisoning this enemy of the unicorns against them and encouraging their destruction. It's very secret, and only she can hear the voice. But the Whisperer is incredibly smart and wicked, insightful and manipulative, and extremely dangerous. And here's the spoiler part. In the final book, the origins of the Whisperer is revealed by one of the unicorns, who tells the story to one of the main characters that the unicorns were so filled with pride and perfectionism that a council of unicorns decided that they wanted to become perfect. And they did a ritual to expel everything that was impure from their bodies, from their energy, from their psyches, so that they could become their idealized selves. And they did this ritual And as they performed it, everything that was impure or undesirable about them was expelled. But because it was a form of life energy, it wasn't destroyed. In fact, it gathered together unbeknownst to the unicorns and created an incredibly negative formation, which became the whisperer and began to plot the destruction of that from which it came. And that is how shadow is formed and how it often operates on the human psyche as well. We cannot destroy the life force. We can exile it. We can abuse it. We can deny or disown it. But when we do that, it often takes on a monstrous force of its own. And suicidal ideation is not infrequently the shadow part of our own self that we are unwilling or unable to integrate, to mature, or to heal within ourselves. And the more we run from it, the more we deny or disown it, the more empowered and vicious it becomes. And counterintuitively, it is only by turning to face and befriend and learn to love our own inner demons that they are truly transformed and resolved. In fact, the more we are able to grow in acceptance and compassion and even love of those parts of ourselves that we most reject, we become more whole than we have ever been before. And this is challenging work, and I know because I have done it over and over again, having layers and layers of self-rejection, self-hatred, self-disappointment, and much to my surprise, and I would even say joy at this point, those disowned parts of myself, as they have become healthy and empowered and given their rightful place within my life, are often the wild, untamed, deeply passionate aspects of myself that hold tremendous power, wisdom, and resources outside of what my limited, idealized self would believe possible. And they have expanded who I am in creative, unexpected, and often surprisingly positive ways. And that work within myself of incorporating shadow informs my work with clients to do the same and leads me back to the deep truth of those words from the Gnostic Gospels. What is within you? If you bring it forth, it will save you. And what is within you if you do not bring it forth? It will destroy you. So I encourage you to make friends with your shadow, to do whatever you can to own it, to make room for it, and the wisdom and power, healing and transformation that it will call and evoke within you so that you can be all of who you are in the world. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, I always appreciate a good review. If you want to reach out with some feedback or podcast ideas, you can DM me on Instagram at Renee McKenna. If you want to find out about my mentorship or perhaps doing a block of work with me, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. And I'm offering free workshops weekly on Insight Timer, at least when I'm in town. So you can check out my Insight Timer profile. And we'll be releasing our 2-part open door growth course on Intro to Shamanism, Lower World and Upper World in the next few weeks. Really simple but powerful approach to doing your own personal growth work and very deep and ancient spiritual practice. So you can keep an eye out for Intro to Shamanism coming soon. Thanks as always to my generous supporters on Patreon, and blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.